Hello, today we're going to talk about the Game Commission and how corrupt they are and what we can do to change all this. Okay, as I said, they're corrupt, they can steal. What they did is I found a deer skull in the woods, a deer skull like this one right here. Found a deer skull like that in the woods. Took it home, they found out, they come to my place, they wanted the deer skulls, said they could find me $800. Proceeded to take some stuff from my basement, which they had no right taking, and not supposed to have these deer skulls. They tried to sell them back. He tried to sell them back to me, the game warden. This is Brian Sheets. And then he takes things that he's not allowed to take. He tells me I can't have them, but later I find out there's no reason I can't have them. So he was just stealing them, and I can't get them back. I called the state police. They can't do nothing. They won't do nothing, let's put it that way. I called the Lebanon County District Attorney's Office. They won't do anything. I called I had a letter wrote to the Attorney General's office. He can't do nothing. The Inspector General of the state can't do nothing. Even the governor was sent a letter about it. Doesn't matter. Nobody cares. If the state steals from you, nobody has jurisdiction over the Game Commission. This is a really big, big problem. So, we're going to go over some things here before we go over how we can change this. Anybody that's dealt with the Game Commission at all knows how corrupt and how asinine they act all the time. Here in Lebanon County, we're having trouble with game wardens because they check goose hunters, and then a day or two later they check the same goose hunters, then a day or two later they check the same goose hunters, and they're basically harassing them while they're hunting. Another example is just recently a man in Pike County, there was a deer that fell through the ice, a spike buck, and this deer was struggling, could not get out of the water, was going to drown. He went out in a boat with a rope tied to it, pulled the deer out of the water, tried to save the deer. The deer died. And what did the Game Commission do? Charged him with taking a deer out of season. And we'll compare that to what the former executive director of the Game Commission did. This is a man named Donald Madel. Okay. And he was the former executive director of the Game Commission. This is the guy at the top. All the way at the top. This is the head man of the Game Commission. In 10 years, this man that worked for the Game Commission brought 123 deer into his office where he worked with the Game Commission, and had Game Commission employees skin 123 deer. Also, 60 of them deer were not tagged in this 10-year period. So that means 60 deer were poached, either by Mr. Madel or with the help of Mr. Madel, who is the former executive director of the Game Commission. Okay, well, finally somebody squealed on this guy, and the Game Commission claims, well, we knew nothing about it. They know nothing about it. They knew nothing about it. It's a sad day. We're going to have to do something. And that's really a bunch of crap. In 10 years, you bring 120 deer, make the Game Commission employees skin them at your office. And the Game Commission knows nothing about it. That's really hard to believe, since he's doing it for 10 years, brought 120 deer in to be skinned, 60 of them untagged. And you know what the Game Commission did to him? They want to fine this guy $800 or whatever for trying to save a deer. They wanted to fine me $800 for picking up a deer skull in the woods that's been laying there for years. And when one of their employees poaches 60 deer, they do nothing. And after 7 years, the statute of limitations ran out, and they did nothing to Mr. Madel, who worked for the Game Commission. This is your Pennsylvania Game Commission, folks. This is how they operate. I once had a Game Commission employee tell me the Game Commission can do whatever they want, and nobody can do anything about it. Well, that's a big problem. That means guys like me are on our own, and when they steal something, we're either going to have to let them steal it or do something about it themselves. So before I go on how to change this, I'd like to say that anybody from the Pennsylvania Game Commission, Pennsylvania Fish Commission, ever step foot, you better never step foot on my property or on one of my leases. Never. And this is to Mr. Sheets or any other game warden or any other Fish Commission personnel. Do not do it. Do not trespass on my lease or on my property. Now we will get to it. We will get to how to change this and what we can do to do something that'll help the hunters more, give the hunters something they deserve better, and how maybe we can get more state game lands. And we'll just go over this plan. It'll save lots of money. Believe me, save lots of money. And I will tell you how to do it. We're going to do this shortly. It's a good idea. I talked to Senator Falmer. He thought it was a good idea. He don't like the Game Commission. He called them the Gestapo. And of course, some politicians will stick up for them no matter what. One of them is Russell Diamond. I recently went to a informative meeting and wanted to ask the game wardens that were there. There were probably like 4 Game Commission personnel there, and about 12 people showed up for this meeting. That's how people hate the Game Commission. But anyway, they saw I was there. Russ Diamond got together with the Game Commission personnel to make it that I couldn't say anything. So first they said everybody has to write down their questions, which everybody was just talking. But I thought, well, I'm going to be courteous. I'll write down my questions. Wrote down my questions, gave them to Russ Diamond, and he said, I'm not going to ask these questions because we don't need no controversy. Well, Russ Diamond, that's probably why we still have to pay property taxes. You know, you talk real big before you get elected, and then once you're elected, you're part of the problem. I even gave you one of these detailed reports about what their executive director did, and I guess you think that's fine. You want to protect your game wardens. Travis Lowell, Brian Burhams, they want to go on television and lie about what their game warden did. You know, they think they're protecting their game wardens, and if their game wardens have no respect, I have no respect for them at all. It creates a bad situation for their game wardens when I know their game warden stole from me. It gives me, and I can't do anything about it, no one will help me. It gives me a really bad attitude toward the Game Commission. So next we'll go over how, oh, by the way, Russ Diamond said he's not asking these questions. He don't need no controversy. I told him to his face he has no balls, and he don't. If you don't want to face problems, and maybe you don't want no controversy now, maybe that's why we're still paying our property taxes. It's easy to talk big before you're elected. Once you're elected, you know, you're just like everybody else. Just like everybody else that is elected. So we're going to go on. If you want to protect the Game Commission, Mr. Diamond, you go right ahead. You want to protect everything they do, you go right ahead. I'm going to go a different route. I went to Mr. Falmer. The Game Commission acts surprised that Mr. Falmer would even meet with me. I mean, the game warden said, oh, he's actually going to meet with you. Yeah, he's going to meet with me and he's going to hear what I have to say. So, Mr. Falmer thinks it's a good idea to close the Game Commission down. So, we're going to go over a plan, and then if you agree with me that I'll give you the plan. If you agree with me that hunters are getting the shaft, the $100 can no longer support the Game Commission. The hunter number of hunters is down, and the Game Commission is probably a big reason for it. they can no longer support this big monstrous thing that they become. And of course there's no oversight for them. So we'll go over a plan and we'll talk about how you can make changes. Okay, thank you for listening to the first part. I'll get back to you with a plan on how we can make some changes to the, actually shut down the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Solve this problem of the PGC. Like I said, I had a meeting with Falmer. Oh, in case you're wondering, yet I'm wearing my Pennsylvania Game Commission hat. If Mr. Sheets wants to come and try to take that from me, go right ahead. You come on over. I can't get him to come over. I even called and reported that I have some of these signs like he took. I have more of them. And for some reason, I called them twice to tell them to come get their signs that they took from me because they're illegal and they don't want to come around. So we'll get on with this, how to close them down. Right now, the PGC is being audited. Probably because they want to know where all this money is going, especially the money from gas drilling rights and timber rights to the state game lands. The Game Commission just no longer is too big, cannot be supported by $100 anymore. You got a Game Commission, a Fish Commission. Every other state has a fishing game department. It's too much. They're out of date. They can't do the things that they're doing anymore, that they were doing. They just can't do them anymore. So my plan is to give everything the Game Commission has to the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources of Pennsylvania. So the Department of Natural Resources will have the state game lands, their shooting ranges, which they act like jackasses at their shooting ranges if you don't have your hunting license. Why are you there sighting your rifle in if you're not going to go hunting? It is just the stupidest thing. Harassing people at their shooting ranges. They'll get everything. Their equipment, their buildings, everything goes to the Department of Natural Resources. What they don't need, they will get rid of. They probably will keep the boats and things like that. So the game wardens from the state police will have them to do their patrols. So the DNRC gets everything from the Game Commission, and everything remains the same. The laws can even remain the same. I don't have any problem with any of their laws, but the DCNR, as they see fit, can change the laws. And this is what's good about this plan. The DCNR makes the laws, and the state police will enforce the laws. So it's two separate organizations. You don't have the same organization making the laws as you do enforcing the laws. That is a big problem. I can't believe something like that still exists. Even the Constitution was wrote. It was wrote that you have a legislative branch and a judicial branch, because you can't have who's ever enforcing the laws making the laws, because it creates corruption right away. So everything goes to the DCNR. In my plan, all money derived from the state game lands, this means timber, drilling rights, gas rights, all that money, except maybe what for little expenditures you have there, should go into a fund to buy more state game lands. Any money that comes from state game lands goes into the fund to buy more state game lands. And I think that would be a good deal for hunters. And that's entirely possible. The Game Commission is a real waste of money. We'll see what the audit comes up with, but my plan is much better. So the Department of Natural Resources get everything. The state police will do the enforcement. Every state police barracks will have, in their area, will have the same amount of game wardens, let's put it that way. And they will each work out of their barracks in their region, closest to their region. And they will be under control. They will be working under whoever in charge of the barracks there. So they'll just be like a regular police officer. They can't do anything illegal. And if you ever stop by the state police, you know how courteous they are, how professional they are, not like the PGC. They will just be game wardens though. But they will also be state police officers. So they can do more than the game wardens. They can make arrests when somebody's trespassing and hunting on your land. You can do things like that. If they see somebody driving erratic, they can pull them over and have them arrested for a DUI. So the state police shouldn't have a problem with this. This is an extra man out in the field. If there's ever an emergency, like an officer needs help, he's on patrol, he can respond right away. And maybe he'll be there first, but he'll be an extra guy out there. Now his duty will be to enforce the game laws, but he can do a multitude of a lot of stuff. Arrest people for DUI when they're driving the boats, and a lot of stuff that the Game Commission can't do. So, and they'll have to follow the laws. They can't have somebody arrested for not talking to them like they got sued for. I think when they order them, they ought to see how much they got sued for and how much money we spent on lawyers and paying out money for lawsuits. I'm sure that's not available to the public, but it's an exorbitant amount. So the state police will do the enforcement, and they will work out of their barracks, and they will have to follow all the rules that the state police follow. So they can't do this stuff like stealing or anything, or when they take something, they'll have to give you a receipt so you can fight it. They'll have a little more sense also than the PGC. Last year, I found somebody baiting on one of the farms that I hunt. And I went to the farmer and I said, I can report this guy for baiting, but the Game Commission will close down the land to hunting for 6 to 8 weeks if I do that. This is why you can't even work with the Game Commission. You can't report anything because they're idiots. So if I report, I said to the farmer, if I report that, they're going to close the land down for 6 to 8 weeks to hunting. And he said, don't report it. He said, if you clean it up, we'll find out who did it and he can no longer hunt there. And ever since that, now I actually lease that land from the farmer. He's very happy with the hunters I have on. And we're taking some deer. He thought there was too many deer. We took 8 deer off of his property this year. So he's very happy. And hunters shouldn't, you got to watch when you're on private property. Please respect your landowner and follow the laws. But in something like that, maybe the state police officer would say, hey, we're charging this guy. We'll charge this guy. And he'll say, hey, you brought this up. I know you hunt here. We'll get the guy to clean this up. Don't hunt around here for maybe a week or so. And he said, then you can hunt again. Something sensible like that. No, we're closing the land down for 8 weeks. Nobody can hunt here. So why would you report something like that on private property? And of course, game wardens hate private property. That's why they do that. They probably wouldn't do that on state game lands, but on private property, oh, they just can't wait to do things like that. So you have the state police, which have a little sense, you know. They just have common sense. They'll work with the hunters. If a hunter does something wrong, they'll fine them. But if they do something that maybe the hunter forgot his license, but he has his doe license with him, they'll look and say, hey, I know you have a license. You have a doe permit with the same number on. I know you have a license. Next time, remember to bring a license. Not the Game Commission. You better believe they would be on top of that. You'd be paying a fine. So the state police would take care of all that. That would be paid for, their vehicles, and that the wardens would be paid for with $100. The rest of the money would go to the DCNR, the Pennsylvania DCNR, and help with expenses that they have. So that's what would happen there. You have 2 separate agencies there, one making the laws and one enforcing the laws, which creates it where you don't have a conflict of interest. Okay, so that I'm sure the state police are doing an excellent job. Many states do this. Many states. I don't know of any other state that has a fish commission and a game commission, and a lot of states have their state police doing their enforcement, and it works out really well. And like I said, there's an extra man out there in case the state police have an emergency. He can respond. He is a state policeman, but his basic job is being a game warden. So that the hunters will surely respect that much more than the game wardens we have now. And I'm sure the state police will be very courteous, but yet do their job. And maybe the hunters can report some things to them, like nobody wants to deal with the Game Commission now. I know a lot of hunters that say they'll never call them about anything. It's just the way it is. So if you think this is a good idea, you can call your representative. Make it known. Like I said, I talked with Senator Falmer. He likes the idea. He calls the Game Commission the Gestapo. He would like to see them closed down. He thinks my plan is good. If you think this plan is good, make a difference. Okay, you can make a difference. You can call your representatives, ordinary representatives, your congressmen, whatever, and complain. Tell them the things that you found out today. Maybe they don't even know it. It's maybe they don't know. But call, make a formal complaint or whatever, or better yet, go see them in person. Tell them if you have anything that you want to tell them about the Game Commission, how they act, what they do. Do that. Make a difference. We can make a difference here and actually get rid of the Game Commission. There's no other law enforcement like it in the United States that can do whatever they want to do like they can. It's time to take a little bit of power back. We still want enforcement, but we want fair enforcement. So call your representatives. And before I go, I'd like to say I was never charged with anything. They just came and took a whole bunch of stuff from me. So that they never charged me with anything. I've never been charged with anything. So before you get on there and say, what did you do? What I did was I picked up a deer skull in the woods when I was shed hunting. They come here and are really asinine, want to know where I got this, where I got my shed antlers. It's none of their damn business. They don't even have any control over who can go pick up shed antlers. Anybody without a license couldn't go out and pick up shed antlers. It's not even under their jurisdiction. It's just like reindeer are not under their jurisdiction. They went to a farmer and told him he must sell his reindeer. Well, he sold his reindeer and he found out they did not have to sell his reindeer. They're not a game animal in Pennsylvania. So he's pretty pissed off. They're under the jurisdiction of the Department of Agriculture, who does not like the Game Commission. The Game Commission says they get along so good with everybody. I talked to somebody on the board of the Department of Agriculture. The Game Commission is always sticking their nose where it don't belong and doing things they're not supposed to do. So it would be better for all the Pennsylvania government if the Pennsylvania Game Commission is closed down. Okay, like I said, you can make a difference. Call your representative, your congressman. Make a little noise. If everybody would make noise like I am, why the Game Commission would be closed already. Remember, the hunters pay for the Game Commission right now, so they should have a choice where that money goes. Even if it comes down to a referendum where hunters get to vote, which the Game Commission will be killed. I'm sure they don't want it to come down to that. So we'll see what we can do. Thank you for watching, and good luck with all your hunting. At the end of this video, I'm just going to post a lot of pictures of some of my fun time out in the Pennsylvania. And good luck to all you hunters out there. And if you want to help out, please do. If you want to keep the same as it is now, don't do nothing. So thank you very much for watching.